So I'm in seminary and they offered this class that was really unique. They offered the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. In this class, they actually have you go outside, find a place to sit alone, and write out your mission statement about what you want to do with your life. I went and sat under a tree. I got my journal out, opened it up, and I knew very clearly that God had called me to plant the church for the next generation. So we are looking all across the country about where to go plant this church. And then one of my friends says, you should consider Corpus Christi, Texas. We managed to convince the realtor who helped us get our apartment to come to the meeting, and a couple of people. The first meeting in our living room of our 1-bedroom apartment of our Bible study that was going to turn into a church had 5 people. And I remember at the end of the Bible study, I looked at them all and I said, I just want you guys to know this isn't a Bible study, this is a church that we're starting. And one day this will be a church of thousands. We grew the core group to 30 people or so, and we decided we need to do something bold and big. Let's rent a school, and let's see if we can fill it. We spent about $4,000 on sound equipment, children's toys that we had to get at garage sales because we couldn't afford new ones. Spent all the rest of the money on a direct mail advertising piece.
I remember the very first night before we had our very first launch service at Ella Barnes, and it was just so scary. I remember that night specifically being so scared because we had risked everything to move here and start this.
And within 2 weeks when we launched, the very first week, we had 236 people, and Bay Area Fellowship was born. We'd grown to probably 250 people. At Grant Middle School, we're now running 450. And we're out of space. Again, great problem to have, but it really was a real problem. So I get up on Sunday morning and I just say, okay guys, we've been in schools for almost 3 years now. We really need location. There's this place called the Moose Lodge. And I saw everyone's head nodding like they all knew where this was because they were all from Corpus, I'm not. Some guy in the back stands up in the middle of service and just says, Pastor, I say we buy this thing. And everyone starts cheering. And I was like, okay, I guess we're buying the Moose Lodge. And by God's grace, the money came in barely enough for us to buy the Moose Lodge.
I remember specifically one time we did a study on faith, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my life right now. Everything is faith, faith, faith. One of the great things about being in ministry is that your faith is always stretched. You don't have the luxury of being a casual Christian because you're always stretched with your faith.
Moving into the Moose Lodge from that point on is what I call the wonder years, because unexplainable growth just started to happen. God just put his hand on it like we've never seen. The very first week in the building, we hit 900 people. It blew our minds and we knew, wow, this is way bigger than we ever dreamed.
I found a box of old papers and there was a flyer in there that Bill used to send out to raise money for our church. And one of the goals was to reach 1,000 people in 10 years. I was like, oh my gosh, we reached 1,000 people so much sooner than that. We were just gonna be glad to reach 1,000 people in 10 years. I think we had both forgotten that that was our goal, and it just reminded us we're living in Ephesians 3:20, that God has done abundantly more than we could ever dream or imagine.
So we did all kinds of crazy stuff in that building. And it was through all those crazy antics that people began to say, you don't know what they're gonna do next. Whether I was ziplining in from above everyone's heads, or we were driving a car on stage, or we were always doing something crazy, using it as teaching points. More and more people kept getting saved, more lives kept being changed, and that was what it was all about to us. So at this point, we ran out of space again because we only sat about 650 people. And so at that point, we began to say, guys, we're going to do something big. We looked at all options to expand where we were. The only thing we could do was to go buy land somewhere else. So we gave everyone who came that next weekend $100 with a letter that said, please take this and multiply it. We talked about the parable of the talents. Multiply this and return it. That money is what we used to buy the land that this building is on now.
I remember feeling like it seemed like forever to get into the broadcast building, the building that we're in now. We just had so many delays, and it's such a big project. We would come out here and walk the land. We'd bring the kids, they were little, we'd bundle them up, and they would play in the big tubes.
In the midst of raising money, we came to a standstill. We needed $3 million, and we simply didn't have it. A man comes up to me I've never met before in my life. He tells me God's prompted me that I'm supposed to give you this. I'm not going to give you $3 million, but I'm going to give you $2 million. And in the course of the next 2 weeks, people brought in $900,000 additional dollars. It took us 2 years to raise $2.7 million. And in one act of obedience, God released $2.9 million more in 2 weeks. And what was really cool about it was we all knew God took over. God did this, and he's going to get the glory for this building, and he certainly has. So a couple years ago, we knew God was leading our church to expand beyond the Coastal Bend area, and the name Bay Area wasn't going to work. Of course, the hard part is we love the name Bay Area. I still love that name. But we also knew God was leading us to have a new chapter in the church. I wrote Church Unlimited based upon Ephesians chapter 3, that God basically is an unlimited God. That's how the name Church Unlimited was born. You know, when it comes to Church Unlimited, I would have to say the thing I'm most thankful for is the people sitting in the seats right now. We would not be who we are as a church without the amazing members.
Just getting a front row seat of life change, especially over 20 years, there's been a lot. I think if I was just attending a church, I don't think I would know so much about it, but where I sit, I just get to hear so much of it, and it's just so miraculous. I love the fact that Church Unlimited will mobilize as an army ready to help anybody in need. I mean, basically, if Bill gets up there at any point and says, okay, we need this, this, and this by tomorrow, I mean, our people, they're just like an army with giant hearts ready to help people. And I love that. I love the spirit of our church when it comes to times like that.
If I could leave any thought in someone's mind about Church Unlimited in the last 20 years, I would say it started with God. God's been all through the middle of it, and God's going to be in the ending of this thing. It really is about taking as many people to heaven as we can before we die, period.